Action.
Hey, Academy, we're back after how many weeks being gone?
Too many weeks.
Too many weeks. We were in California for 5 weeks.
That's why I have this healthy glow.
Nice tan.
Looking good, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you. You're around.
So we've been gone this whole time creating content, teaching clinics, been super, super busy. Some of you in the chat were actually out there, so it's good to see you again. We have, before we get into the meat of why we're all here together to talk about approach shot success, we have a huge announcement that we want to talk to you about. Ian.
So I'm guessing if you're watching this, you probably saw the email yesterday, but we're going to be holding for the first time a free clinic on May 25th. And this is just for Academy students. We're not opening this up to any other of our viewers or even our other customers, which we have thousands of them across all of our other courses. But this is just for Academy. It's something where, I don't know, personally, I just felt like those of you who have been in Academy, especially for a while, you support us month after month after month. Of course, we work hard to give you regularly updated, valuable coaching. But still, really just wanted to show appreciation and gratitude for the ongoing support that all of you give us. And so yeah, if you show up on May 25th here in Milwaukee, then you'll get a full day of coaching for free. Now, this is not, our normal, you've of course seen us work with students where it's all 4 of us with 1 student. It's not going to be like that. In fact, we're capping this at 36 people. As of this moment, there's 20 spots taken. So really just a handful of spots left after less than 24 hours. So if you go to the welcome page inside of the Academy members area, on the upper right-hand side, there's a little link that says register. Click here. There's a little video there where I explain a few more of the details, and you can register there. So yeah, looking forward to working with all of you in person who are able to make it. We're going to record the whole thing, so if Milwaukee is out of the way, which it is for 99.99% of the world, no worries. We're going to record it all and make sure that the rest of you in the members area are able to take advantage of the coaching that we give as well. So that's it, I think.
Awesome. So we hope to see you there.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's get into today's coaching. We're all about approach shot success. And we had some themes and we have tons of questions. So we want to get right into it and pack a punch every time that we answer something. So that's not what we always do. The first theme that was a really big occurrence in these questions was hitting slice or topspin. So this is a question from Jim Hayes.
What's up, Jim?
Do I hit a backhand slice to skid and stay low, or a topspin drive to take the ball through the court? That's part 1 of his question.
Who wants to take it?
I think you want it.
I know, I feel
Okay, I'll take it.
You're like,
I think it's about positioning. If you're going to hit a slice, the object of the slice is to stay low, giving you time to get into better position. Usually if the ball's a little lower, that's when you're going to use the slice. If the ball's higher above the net, again, positioning on where your opponent is. So basically, if they're on the other side of the net or other side of the court and you're approaching down the line, you could be a little bit more aggressive with the topspin and move in. If they're, let's say, in the middle of the court and you're hitting down the line, I would actually use a little bit more topspin, again, giving myself more time to get into the court and get a better position. So as far as using slice or topspin, if the ball's low, I tend to use more slice. If the ball's higher, I tend to use more topspin. I hope that answered the question.
I think it did. Now, second part of the question, down the line or cross court?
Let me go a little bit higher level with my answer. Kevin gave a great tactical look at which one to use. I think for me personally, it's probably something I'll come back to a couple times. I think the whole concept or thought or attitude of or is a flawed one, meaning topspin or slice, down the line or across court, either or. You should be able to execute both. And Kevin, we could go down and make a list of probably 100 different situational scenarios, tactically speaking, in singles and doubles, where slice is the best shot, or where topspin is the best shot, or where down the line is the best shot, or where cross court is the best shot. There's a whole lot of reasons why in singles, down the line makes a lot of sense. But not in every situation. There's a whole lot of situations in doubles where cross court makes the most amount of sense, but not every time. And so yeah, I just kind of wanted to throw that out there first. I don't want all of you to be stuck in a legalistic mindset. And I think a lot of coaches and a lot of players get stuck here, where if they're a little more old school, they're like, oh, you got chip in charge. Or if they're a little bit, if they see themselves as kind of like a modern coach, it's like, oh, you got to rip that, approach, like no matter what. And so I just kind of want to give my 2 cents there. I think it's really important as far as developing yourself as a well-rounded player to have the ability to do both the slice and topspin, down the line and cross court, inside out and inside in. If you don't have all of those tools in your toolbox, then maybe you will be stuck with just the slice down the line. And if that's the case, then a good opponent is going to be able to pick up on that in like 3 approaches and be ready for what you have to offer very, very quickly. Sorry, a little side tangent, but those are my 2 cents.
So in essence, it depends.
Yeah, it's super situational. Generally, as I said a second ago, generally speaking, there's a lot of geometrical reasons why down the line in singles makes the most amount of sense. And there's a lot of positional reasons why in doubles, cross court is usually going to make the most amount of sense. Those are like your rules of thumb, but there's literally 1,000 reasons we could come up with why breaking those rules of thumb might be the right choice. Sorry if I just killed the topic.
Can we break down? And on that note,
see you guys next week.
Can we break down when the best time to go down the line would be versus the best time to go cross court?
Good question.
Anybody want to?
I just talked for a while.
Okay.
Somebody else.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Not all at once. The best time to go down the line, I think it is situational, but I usually think about where my opponent is a lot of times. So if they're in the middle of the court, I'm going to generally, again, I'm working for positioning. I'll go down the line. If I'm going to go cross court, it's a running game, meaning that I'm hitting the ball cross court because I know I can be in position before they get to the ball. So it usually means if I'm taking a forehand cross court as an approach, they're probably on the backhand side, deep off the court maybe, and I'm approaching that way. And I know by the time I hit my shot, by the time they get to the shot, I'm already set up, ready to go, and they're en route to the ball. So for me, that's my kind of rules or guidelines as far as if I'm going to go cross court. The only other time I might go cross court is if I went, kind of speaking to what Ian said, if I went down line so much, they're just camping out now. I need to mix it up. I need to make sure I'm not super predictable. And those are kind of my 2 areas where I would go cross court.
I think also if it's your opponent's weakness, that's a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
If they can't hit a forehand and are missing a ton of forehands, go cross court all day. If obviously right-handed,
Totally.
or if backhand down the line, forehand down the line. So if anytime you can use your weapon to their weakness, that's where you want to go all day, whether it's down the line or cross court.
Scott just made a good, just to bounce off of what Kevin was just talking about it being a running game when you go across court. Scott in the chat said people might be confused since from the baseline geometry implies cross court as being a safer choice because there's more room, et cetera, et cetera. But Scott correctly points out in the chat that once you get well inside the baseline, the geometry changes. Everything flip-flops because the ball is no longer crossing the middle line by your opponent. Your opponent's shot is no longer getting further and further and further away from the center line. You are intercepting it and cutting it off sooner, which means that if you hit away from yourself, you're leaving yourself vulnerable, and a lot more court needs to be covered when you go cross court versus down the line. So the geometry basically flip-flops. And so anytime you're in an approaching scenario in singles, down the line is the geometrical advantage target. Cross court should only be done when there's a really good reason to do it, which there are good reasons, like Megan just pointed out, there being a weakness, etc., or they're out of position, or whatever it is. There's a pattern that you've recognized that it sets up the advantage for you. So just keep that in mind. Geometry doesn't always mean cross court is the best shot. When it comes to approaching in singles, that all gets flipped completely.
So we have covered where you should hit your approach shot and why. The next question that I think would be a perfect layer on top of that is from Rainey. The question is, I always overhit or hit it where they can lob over me or pass me with an angle. I also tend to go for too much. Where do I position myself to cover the angle and lob and volley?
The ultimate
The spot. She
The
wants to know the spot. Everybody wants to know the spot.
It's where the X is on the court.
Yeah.
That's where the treasure is.
Here you go, Rainey. Here's the spot. There's where you stand to cover everything. I'm just kidding.
It was like, oh.
Yeah, there's a couple topics in there, Rainey. First of all, target-wise, let's talk about singles. And it really applies to doubles too. I think it's really important to give yourself at least. So in California, we ran several times this kind of experimental drill where we had players, doubles players, line up on the alley, and we fed them easy balls and had them try to hit down the alley. And our first group was successful 33% of the time. And our second group was successful 25% of the time. This is a 4.5 foot wide chunk of court. So when you're approaching, if you're coming into the net and you're aiming anywhere closer than the width of the alley, in my opinion, it's too close. You should be giving yourself 4 feet, 5 feet. And unless you're, if you're a 4-5, 5-0 player and you've got an especially, easy sitting shot, then I'm okay with you going 2 feet, from the line, maybe a foot from the line. If you're a high level player and it's a really easy ball. Most of you watching right now, I'm going to suggest 4 feet to 5 feet from the sideline and at least 4 feet, 5 feet from the baseline. If you're purposefully targeting anything closer than that, then you're just leaving yourself very vulnerable to a lot of unforced errors. Make sure you give yourself plenty of margin over the net as well. And here's the thing, I think players need to have more of a setup mentality, meaning use your positioning at the net to intimidate your opponent and force them to try to come up with the laser, thread the needle shot to try to beat you instead of putting that pressure on yourself. Just your very presence alone coming up to the net puts a great amount of pressure on them tactically to have to try to come up with something amazing. So as far as target selection is concerned, play it relatively safe, put the pressure on them, make them try to come up with an amazing lob or an amazing passing shot. As far as positioning, there's so many variables that go into that. Depends on where your shot is hit exactly, how much trouble you put your opponent in exactly, and your level of athleticism when it comes to being able to effectively move both laterally to cover passing shots and also vertically backwards to cover lobs. I'll kind of leave it. If somebody else wants to go more into depth on that, I'll leave it at that. There's a lot of variables though, as far as like the spot where you should be standing.
No, I agree. I think maybe another thing is just looking, we did this a lot in California too, where understanding what it looks like when your opponent potentially might hit a lob, meaning that if the racket face is open or if it's closed, looking like they're going to drive through. And that's kind of another hint. And there's these layers of understanding not only like how many times does your opponent hit the lob or the passing shot, so what shot do they like, also what their racket setup is like when you're coming forward. And if you can kind of start to piece these layers together, you start building kind of a profile of when they might lob the specific shots because you can read the racket face and you also know their tendencies.
Yeah, I think just to add on a little bit was the every player at every single level has shots that they love, and they have something that's in their back pocket for if someone approaches against me, this is what I like to try first. And so it's figuring out those little quirks of your opponent that make approaching a lot easier and make you be able to be make them more predictable on what you're going to do with your next shot, and not to look at it as a winner. Always look at it as a setup shot to hit a great volley. And if you do a good job, then your volley should be easy or overhead.
That's a really good point. Yeah, the overall mentality needs to shift. You're never thinking, this is a winner, this is a winner, this is an approach shot. So there's always something else beyond that when you're building the point. I want to jump to the next question that's a little bit more on the technical side. It's from Vanessa, wondering about arm tension on the chip shot. Vanessa says, I've been crushing my chip and charge returns lately.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I fear they are crushing me too. Sorry. My forearm and shoulder are getting really tight. You talk about being loose in topspin shots, but I'm wondering about chip and slice shots. My personal experience is I tend to grip tighter.
Yeah, I think a lot of this has to do with your depth on the court and how much pace you have to work with. In other words, if you're playing this shot off like a neutral rally ball that's landing in the middle of no man's land, and this is on the aggressive end of the spectrum, and you're like behind the baseline and trying to step through it and like really knife it, I could see this maybe over time there being some stress there, because that definitely takes more firmness and more acceleration through the ball. You still shouldn't be squeezing tightly, but I'm just kind of laying out the examples here. On the other hand, if you're doing this off like a return of serve, you're inside the baseline and you've got a lot of pace to work with. The server has pretty good amount of pace. Then honestly, the amount of force through the ball is very minimal to hit a pretty good, chip type shot and just come in behind it. Especially if your footwork is good and you're transferring through the shot as you hit. You combine that with good amount of pace coming to the racket, and there should be really very minimal squeezing or tension happening. And then you've got everything in between. So if you're feeling like a lot of tension and you're not in this scenario, like behind the baseline, trying to really kind of make something happen, then you're probably squeezing too tight. Hopefully that didn't overcomplicate it. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Kind of got two like ends of the spectrum, and if you're kind of in the middle, but you've got pain, then my opinion or guess would be that you've got too much of Hulk hands going on the handle.
Yeah. Hulk hands.
And just giving
Hulk
yourself
squeeze.
like a something to focus on, like focusing on loosening the fingers and maybe starting at the net and drop feeding a few and work your way back so you can get used to what it feels like to actually have that loose grip from closer to the baseline.
Yeah, I think one other thing is technically kind of being aware of how much of the rest of your body you're using.
Yeah.
And it's not just saying arm motion, it's turning your shoulders a little bit. It's also using your legs to lean into the ball, which I think of it this way. It's like you may be using your arm at like 70% to produce the power instead of using your legs at 20, your core at 20, your shoulders at 20, your arm, and that collective use of your body takes away the kind of like impact that I think you might hopefully, or not hopefully, but you're experiencing that hopefully we could take away if you're using the rest of your body. So I'd just be aware of like when you're hitting, are you just using your arm, or are you actually loading up, stepping in and stepping through the ball when you hit it?
Kirby is buying Hulk hands on Amazon right now.
We used to have them at
Dude,
our.
that would be amazing.
Yeah,
for
we
a
used to
video
have.
thumbnail.
Well, it just made me think of like I don't know why this is the first time I've heard you guys say Hulk hands like 5 times in the past couple of weeks. But at my old club in New York, we had these Hulk hands for the little kids, like just to play with.
Can you feel a racket in there?
Yeah, look at this. This one's like actually, it's actually gripped so you could hold something.
Oh, because I've
You
only
hold your
seen
beer,
like
you
the
hold
green
your
ones
racket.
that are like
Yeah, that are like
100%
this.
We should have a video
Pick some of
playing
those
tennis
up.
with Hulk hands.
Hulk hand
sure.
tennis.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's on the way. Next question from Simon: is it best after you to approach after you've played a drop shot?
I would say yes. Everybody's like, I'm jump on it.
What
Yes.
about on a crappy drop shot?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Obviously, if you hit a good drop shot,
Depends.
yeah, it depends. Well, Ian's gonna answer this
Yeah.
next. I think the whole purpose of the drop shot, and again, this comes down to mindset, especially this, at least in my opinion. The purpose of the drop shot isn't to hit a winner. It's actually to bring your opponent forward in an uncomfortable position. If you hit a winner, great. If not, unless you hit a really amazing drop shot, they're going to get to it, but they're going to be in trouble. And then you move in and take advantage of that poor positioning that you put them in with the drop shot. And I think so many people, when they think drop shot, it's like, ooh, I'm going to hit a drop shot that bounces on their side, it comes back over, and I'm going to hit a winner. And then you wind up making too many mistakes. Again, the purpose of the drop shot is to pull your opponent out of position and take advantage of that weak positioning that you've created by moving forward, answering your question, and hopefully taking another volley out of the air, winning the point.
But don't just sprint in when you hit the drop shot, because I have seen that happen before. People are like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to run forward. I'll just hit a drop shot and sprint to the net.
Well, that's what Ian does, and he just sticks it in his racket. Like.
Love it.
Don't do what Ian does. So instead, make sure that when you're actually you hit the drop shot, maybe take a few steps in and see what they're going to do. Watch their racket face, like Kevin was saying. They're going to tell you what they're going to do, whether they're going to if they're really reaching and barely getting there, they're not going to hit a great deep ball. So that's an opportunity for you to move forward and use the open court to your advantage. But if they get up there and they're getting set and you're running full force to the net, you're going to be in big trouble.
You did not hit a good drop shot.
Yeah. Be prepared.
Danger. So good follow-up question to Simon's question is, when is it good to approach down the middle? Meaning this at the opponent's body, and when is it good to approach short, either via drop shot or short angle? What are the disadvantages and advantages of both?
It's the situational hands.
Situational hands.
Situational hands. We're gonna start using that. Okay. Well, I think I don't think there's a bad time or a good time. I think for me, when I start approaching down the middle is usually because the opponent's either passing me because I create angle. There's some players out there that I've played that you hit amazing, really good in the corner shot, and they love taking that power and redirecting and creating an angle. And so that's a great time to go to the middle, because now you've taken away their angle, and a lot of times they have to come back to you, or maybe they have to hit a lob. At the same point, hitting the short approach is another great shot. If you have an opponent who you've been, let's say, crushing deep approaches, they're backing up and they're hitting a good shot. Well, great time to throw in a mix-up of a short approach. I think it's really about taking a mental kind of notebook in your head or whatnot of what shots are working, and when the shot stops working, throw in a mix-up. To kind of get your opponent to readjust, and it actually helps those shots that maybe weren't working as much start working again. For instance, if I'm hitting deep approaches all the time to the corner and it's working, and then suddenly they come up with a lot of great passing shots, go down the middle. If I'm hitting down the middle deep and they back up, well, and they start winning points, go short. And then it readjusts their position, so they're like, oh, he might go short, so they scoot up, and then you're deep to the corner or down the middle. Approaches start working again, because they have to continuously adjust to what you're doing.
I think Kevin and Megan over the last several answers have talked about tendencies among players. I think it's just really important to pay attention to that. That's pretty much the long and the short of it. There's some players who absolutely relish the chance to hit a running, stretched out, pass, and it's their strength. And hitting right at those players can be a great tactic. Other players love just like the more power you feed them, like the bigger of a shot they hit back. And so those players maybe are less comfortable having to run and get stretched out, or run forwards vertically and have to be challenged with vertical difference in position on the court. So it's just a matter of being aware of your opponent. That's all.
Scott made a good point. Down the middle can work well versus people who hit flat. If you hit down the middle, you're forcing your opponent to create the direction. So first, against some people, that's who have that as a weakness, and that's another nuance that would be helpful. Let's move on to the next question about two elevation extremes. what are your thoughts on the two elevation extremes as approach shots? So think of these as like not just topspin versus slice, but like extreme. A loopy, high topspin ground stroke to allow more time to get to the net in split step, or a low, shorter slice to force opponents to hit up. And think about this for doubles. The follow-up question is, do you favor one more than the other in doubles in the traditional cross-court rally situation to get to a 2-up formation?
As she's reading the question.
Well, first of all, I think if you're in a traditional rally situation, and it kind of depends. If you're in the one-up, traditional cross-court rally to get to a 2-up formation. If you're one up, one back, you of course want to keep the ball really low, except if you're in a situation where you're in a match where nobody poaches ever, which happens all the time in amateur tennis, then you shouldn't be so scared about hitting a high loopy topspin approach shot if that's what is working. A lot of 3-0, 3-5 players really struggle with getting pushed back with topspin.
Sorry, was this a double specific question?
Yes.
Okay.
So in traditional cross-court rally situation to get to a 2-up formation. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, it's either one that's working for you, except for when it comes to hitting a loopy topspin ground stroke, you have to consider that it's going to be passing the middle a lot higher, and you're putting yourself and your partner in harm's way.
Stranger danger.
Yeah, that can be bad for all involved.
Yeah, I think the level is an important consideration. If we're talking about beginner, level, then high moonball it up. Like then nobody's really going to be crossing much on that. Intermediate to advanced, especially towards advanced, you're asking for your partner to get pegged with a ball. If you leave a bunch of balls hanging, going cross court and high,
it's a good way to lose a friend.
Unless you can place it just perfectly, but it better be just the right height and width, or else that opposing net player is going to be looking for it in a hurry to try to cross on it. So yeah, I think it's really like smart question. I think it's really good to practice both, because you're going to come across different opponents who struggle with either or. And I think the approach mentality too often is just kind of just crush it, hard kind of mentality. We were talking earlier within the context of singles about trying to make it a winner. And I think in doubles too, like players are just trying to finish the shot instead of thinking of it as a setup shot. So having these different heights and depths and spins they're great tools to be able to give your opponents different looks, kind of poke and prod them in different ways and see where they're least comfortable. So yeah, definitely practice both. But I think my bottom line is it depends on what level you're playing and the confidence of that net player as far as which one I would go to first.
And I think how well they move, because you can use topspin as an angle as well, not only just to push them back, but if you can actually angle the ball off the court, do they move very well off the court to be able to actually get that ball back cross court? Some people really struggle with that. So that can also be a way to get in for 2-up.
Great point. So speaking of how well people move, let's move on and talk about a couple of footwork related questions. This question is from Archie Dan, and he asks,
Archie Dan.
Wait,
let me give Archie Dan a plug. What's the name of his book? Is it over there? Go ahead and answer.
Okay,
ask this question.
Okay, question is, your opponent hits short. Do you rush up to have enough time to split step and get set up, stop, hit your approach shot, then move forward to your final at net position? Or you have more of a smooth, less rushed approach and never fully stop as you hit your approach and get to your final net position?
Depends on the height of the approach.
Archie Dan. Here you go, Archie. Definitely check out this book. It's on Amazon.
I think
plugging it like salted nut rolls.
Where are those, by the way? You owe me some push-ups or something.
I don't even remember. Sorry.
What was the question again?
I'm talking about net rolls and books.
Basically, on your approach for your footwork, should you like smoothly
Yeah.
transition up to the net without stopping, or should you kind of stop at every position?
I think for the actual approach shot, it all depends upon the height of the ball and how much time you have. If you have a ton of time, you want to get to the ball as quickly as possible, get set, and be able to hit and then move forward. But if you don't have a ton of time, then, transitioning off the front foot and moving forward, or the karaoke step on the back, backhand slice moving forward can make a huge difference transitioning in. So I don't know if she's talking about just was it Archie? I don't know if she's talking about just the approach shot or like the volleys that come after the approach.
I think it's just the approach shot, because he's saying enough time to split step, / get set up, stop, hit.
Yeah, I agree with the height is one thing. I think kind of like when you're saying the split step's going to happen when your opponent hits the ball. So there's not necessarily a rush around the split step, because it's like, okay, they've hit, I'm splitting. And then you're making the choice of.
Archie's saying just the approach in the chat.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So yeah, the split step shouldn't create any kind of split step should be smooth. And then it's, again, selecting what type of approach. Are you hitting a ball that's, let's say, waist high, like Megan's talking about, and you're approaching through it? Or is it a short ball where you're going to stop and set up? Either way, I want to be, in my mind, I want to be smooth for all of that to maintain my balance. I mean, I can still be fast and be smooth, because if you can't get there balanced, then you're not going to hit a quality shot anyway. So I think it's really important that you have to move fast enough that you can control your body and maintain your balance to hit a high quality shot when you get there.
Yeah, I think the distinction that Kevin just drew is really important. How much time do we have? And Megan was talking about this as well. I think there's kind of an old school mentality that you need to hurry up, get to where the ball is, get set, turn to the side, like step in and hit the ball. And in real life, that just rarely do you have the luxury of that much time to be able to actually execute all that. So I think more modern, dynamic footwork patterns are really important so that you can move and hit at the same time. Usually that entails loading with the outside leg instead of stepping across and into the shot. We have a section in Academy called Footwork Pattern Success, I think it's called. Also within our approach shot section, we demonstrate different footwork patterns to be able to dynamically move through the shot instead of getting planted, stopped, and getting set for the shot, hitting, and then moving forwards. It's definitely better to transition through as you hit. I would say in the majority of cases, that's your best bet.
That leads me to Donald Swanson's question. Can you please compare when, where, and why to use a skip step versus an open stance followed by a step on your approach shot?
I think that's the exact same.
Yeah,
it's the same thing.
I think open stance, and then and as you swing, stepping forwards is more for a situation where you've got plenty of time. The ball is sitting up, and you have the ability to load and get set, swing, and then transition forwards. Whereas the hop step or skipping step or walking step, whatever you want to call it, outside foot transition through the ball is more so for when everything's kind of flowing together at once and you don't have the luxury of the amount of time to stand there, get set, and then swing and transition through.
I think sometimes I'll throw this in there. Moving diagonally to cut off a ball, you can use the outside leg and actually step through it pretty quick too, because sometimes it's awkward that you can't do the front foot hop. If, let's say, the court's this way, I'm moving this way, it's hard to do the front foot hop off the court. So you can still use your outside leg and hit an open stance and step through the outside leg. You're like, whoa. But you can step through the outside leg and use that to cut off the ball and then follow it down the line. So that's another option with the open stance outside leg type footwork.
Our next question.
Sorry, I just want to let you know I added something.
Do you want to move to it right now?
If you had a flow going, go ahead and keep going.
Okay. I just want to answer a question from Ray Dothard. When I hit the approach shot moving to the net, I'm too slow getting the tennis racket back up and in front of me while on the move to be ready to volley. How can we help?
Wow, the ball's getting on you in a hurry.
Yeah.
Or there's some extracurricular stuff going on with the racket. Unless we're talking about double scenario where you're like hitting an approach at a net player, there should be plenty of time there. Honestly, it's kind of my knee-jerk response to that.
It could be that sometimes I think people that if you're struggling, you have to. Who is this?
This is Ray.
Ray. I don't know if Ray is on here, but if you're ending low, a lot of times that makes it very difficult to come back up to get ready to hit the volley. So you maybe want to actually work on the technique of the follow through of your stroke rather than actually getting ready for the next ball. Because I think that happens a lot.
I think tagging on to exactly what Megan's saying, in the follow through generally, if you're catching the racket I tend to catch the racket or my racket tends to follow back in some position where my left hand grabs onto the racket, that can be used to reset you back into a ready position for the shot. So when you're finishing your shot, if you're finishing, if you're left hand, I don't know if you're two-handed or one-handed, but generally if you're a two-hander, you're naturally geared to get that left hand ready for something. And even if you're one-handed, there's a sense of, okay, my racket hand needs to come back to a ready position. So that might be something just to check out. If you're just kind of randomly, and then the racket's kind of going around compared to getting it ready again.
Well, and no matter whether it's a court positioning thing, a ready position thing, having extracurricular activity on your follow through or whatever is going on, use video to see what's actually happening, because it could be a number of things that's really prohibiting you from getting to the next step and having your racket up and ready. The only real way of knowing what's going on is being able to see it for yourself. Let's move on to, where'd it go? Oh, John Mulling's question. Could you talk about the unplanned approach where you see your opponent turn his back, so you decide to go in quickly?
Sneak play.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime your opponent, like and I don't know the context, maybe it might be if you've hit a lob, or maybe you've hit a really deep, high, heavy forehand to the corner and they've kind of halfway turned their back. Anytime I see my opponent turn their back, I call it a red flag. A red flag means I need to start moving forward and take advantage of the situation. Like that red flag.
I like that.
Red
flag, y'all.
Red flag, y'all. But yeah, anytime I see that red flag, I start moving forward, because anytime your opponent takes their vision, their eyes off of you and you see their back, they cannot tell what you're doing. One thing. Second thing is they're in a defensive situation. Whenever they're facing away from the court, it's much more difficult to control what you're trying to do to get the ball to go behind you. So you have a huge opportunity there that you got to take advantage of by moving forward and taking time away from them to react to your next shot based on their defensive shot of turning their back.
Well, and this is another instance where you do not run to the net, just sprint all in. That you actually have to, pace yourself, and you might you might hit a great forehand that's bringing them off, and they do a turnaround, have their back to you as they're trying to recover. Take a few steps in, look to attack the next ball, but it's not just sprinting in and, hope for the best.
That's a really good point. Like Ian does.
Yeah. Don't be like Ian.
What do you do?
Do what I say, not what I do.
It sounds like I'm being me, but it's like hilarious. That's Ian's play. He just sticks his racket out like a pancake and goes like this up into the net. Okay, and it usually works. But for Ian, but don't do it. Okay, so SJ has.
I've also been hit in the face, so.
So the SJ has the kind of flip of that question. Can we talk about the defensive approach when you kind of accidentally approach? And you've been brought in by your opponent's short ball. What type and where are good shots?
Wait. So
like they're bringing you in
they're
on
bringing
purpose.
You in, not turning your back.
So like where to aim?
I think
and
so.
You're getting drawn in by a short ball?
I believe so. I think
but
so.
Not really
Well, hopefully it's not a great, I mean, if you're ready for it, then you should be on the offense. It should be like a aha moment.
No, but I could see where I've had a situation where sometimes you're in a rally and they hit a shorter than you thought ball. They just hit a really, miss it. Or sometimes a
I thought
slice
you
ball.
mean they bring you in on purpose.
I mean, I think it could be that
like
too.
Roger,
but it's like a short dump and you're like running up and the ball's below the net. I think personally, your best bet is to try to get the ball deep down the middle. If you're able to create a little bit of spin on the, some backspin on the ball, much better, because that'll give you a little bit more time to set up. The reason why I think deeper is because if the ball goes deeper, you're going to have a little bit more time. Also, because it goes deeper, it's going to give your opponent has to be further away from you. You don't want to dump it short, and then you're kind of running up, trying to organize yourself. They're coming forward, and then you're going to have to react to a ball that's much closer to you compared to hitting it deep, where the ball's deeper and you have more time. That's pretty much my play. I mean, if I see that short ball, I'm gonna push it back deep, maybe add some backspin to give myself time, and set up in a good position.
Earlier we were talking about how the geometry flips as you go into the net. It's just to kind of call that back really quickly. When you're engaged in a baseline rally and you're a little bit off balance or really off balance, that's when you especially want to adhere to the directional rules of thumb. I'm talking about singles here. Well, doubles too. And so cross court should be your target, all day when you're in a little bit of an uncomfortable position. Same thing when you're approaching. If you get drawn in, not, on your own will, and you're kind of being forced into an approach, and you're even just a little bit kind of getting stretched and uncomfortable, that's when you really want to make sure that you stick with the high percentage geometrical patterns. And that means down the line. If you're a little bit awkward, a little bit uncomfortable, kind of stretching, especially if it's low, and especially if you're wide, hitting that cross court just makes it unbelievably difficult for you to effectively cover the court for the next shot. So in addition to kind of mentality around type of shot, I would kind of add that as far as mentality for targeting in that situation.
And give yourself enough margin, because I think this shot is missed so easily and so much because players are trying to do too much. And they're like, oh, it's short, I got to hit this.
It's got to be special.
Yeah, it's got to be special. And it's like, keep it really simple and put yourself in position to hit the next shot. I mean, really, if you do that, you'd be surprised how many times you'll be able to kind of get yourself back in the point, if not win it, or at least give your opponent a chance to make a mistake.
Kirby, you're not going to answer the question in the chat about tennis beer pong 2018?
I didn't see it.
What?
Where is it?
Come on, Kirby.
I don't see
The
it.
chat window's way too small.
You bet.
Oh my God, Les. We'll talk about it later. All right, let's.
Now that the Garlingtons are fully.
Well, I think it should be a
board.
team trip. It's a team. Here's the thing. Here's the legend. This is what happened. Les is going to turn 21 on April 20th. 20. Is this 18?
You remember the date?
Yeah.
That would have been 2016, Kirby. That was 2 years ago.
Yeah, but 2 years ago, I can't believe that's coming up. 2 years ago, he came to our event at Indian Wells.
Oh, yeah?
And he challenged me.
Oh, yeah?
To play tennis beer pong on his 21st birthday.
Oh, snap.
In San Francisco.
You're chickening
Yep,
out?
he says April 20th, 2018. Oh my God, that's just around the corner.
All right, so anyway,
I don't
sorry.
know what to do.
Sorry.
All right, we'll get there. Low ball down the line. Okay.
Good direction, Kirby.
Pivot. Our question from Ariana is, when in a defensive situation running forward and the ball has dropped below the net around the service box, what is the secret to hitting a ball down the line? Preferably being able to hit the ball behind your opponent if they're lateral to the ball.
Well, whether or not down the line is behind them is totally up to them in what they're anticipating. But I think there's kind of two distinct situations here. One is the situation where it really is kind of a pure emergency shot, and you're really just hoping to get your strings underneath the ball before it bounces for the second time. And in that situation, it's just all about finding the right angle with the racket face and just having the right firmness with your hand to really just kind of guide the ball forwards. And for sure, like we talked about 5 minutes ago, don't hit this cross court. Should stay in front of you. Hopefully place it as deep as you can, but staying pretty conservative, as Kevin was talking about. I mean, give yourself 8 or 9 feet in between each line, just direct it straight ahead and just open the racket base and just guide the ball forwards. If the ball's like 6 inches higher than that, then we can start to kind of talk about topspin if you have that shot. But it really just depends on what you have. If it's 6 inches or higher, I'm going with topspin most of the time. If you have that shot, great. If not, then we can start to think about giving the ball a little bit more bite or a little bit more stick forwards through the court, but still using kind of a slice or maybe drivey slice kind of shot.
You just call it shoveling.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Shovel it.
Just shovel it.
Shovel it over there.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, goodness.
Just shovel it.
It's got really, yeah.
Okay, let's go on to Jim Falvo's question. Assuming an opponent
Off the rails.
hits a short ball landing in one of the service boxes with pace and placement that invites an approach shot, for example,
Pace in the service box.
not hit too hard and or at a sharp angle, what type of spin, pace, and placement do you suggest a good recreational player use for approach shot success? Do I need to repeat that?
Yes, please.
I feel like it's like hard to get a short ball with pace.
In the service box.
Yeah,
So
it's like-
we're
Yeah.
talking a pretty low like trajectory, shot.
Yeah.
Skidding.
Probably. Yeah, probably.
In the
Assuming an
service box?
opponent-
It's pretty intense.
Tell you what, those balls we were hitting yesterday, it was happening all the time.
Which one?
I guess.
With like a low drive,
Yeah. Okay.
I could definitely see this happening.
Okay.
So if it does have pace and it's short, I mean, this is not happening a lot unless you're playing like a pretty traditional grip, kind of player that's hitting relatively straight drives. I think it's all about getting the ball to come up and down really quick, unless you're using slice. So being able to really come vertical quickly and shape the ball confidently, I think is super key. Again, taking into consideration there's pace and the ball is low and short. It's kind of a tricky thing. Most low short balls don't have a lot of pace, and so there's not a lot of energy coming off your strings, and so you kind of have a little bit more margin. But if the ball has pace and it's low and short, you've got to really come vertically really well to shape the ball enough to keep it in play, which is tough for a lot of amateur players.
Wow. I think you have two options come out. It's like the Red October. Meaning that, sorry.
Yeah, it's
Internal.
exactly like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Red October.
That's what I
Okay,
was thinking.
I'll break out the. So it's like if you've ever watched the movie Red October, the guy fires a missile and he tells the boat to get closer because they have a certain range before the missile can explode. So in tennis, how this works is if the person's hit that forehand and it's getting low, they are essentially too close, and you're going to disarm them by maybe hitting a lob above them if they're close, but that's really hard sometimes. The other thing I would say is if you can control it, is try to keep the ball low, because if the ball's already low, you're at a disadvantage of trying to actually hit up on it, because if it's so low, they're going to see you reaching onto the racket and they're going to back up and prepare for an overhead. So going higher with the lob is very difficult if the ball's hit short fast. I think almost your best option is to actually take the ball and chip it right back to them and see if you can keep it fairly low over the net and go from there.
Mm-hmm.
Shovel it. But yeah, if you can just take this ball back with a continental grip generally and shovel, nice shovel, back lowish, I think that's the best option, because if you're going to go up on the ball and hit the ball high, they're just going to see it coming, and you're going to be staring down an overhead. Lowish.
When you say shovel it, you're just aggressive. Shovel it.
Shovel. It's just an exciting word. And the way you do it, you're like, shovel. I feel like I'm going to karate chop this table. I'm just going to like break in half.
Yeah, moving forward.
We're married, by the way.
Megan's like, what am I going to do these clowns?
We need to have you guys make a couple videos. Okay, we'll do that. So
everything's moving on.
This is everything's off the rails. The chat's off the rails. We're off the rails. Let's get back on topic. This one's about creating your own pace. Evelyn in Atlanta says, I have problems with opponents that hit with no pace. I should be able to hit an approach shot, but end up overhitting and spraying balls out. What suggestions do you have for this scenario? You get this juicy ball that's just short and sweet, and you're so excited, you can't even handle it. Your eyes are as big as tennis balls, and then you just blow it. What do you do?
You go for a good shot and never a winner. I think that is always the biggest time is when we go too big because we think we should be hitting a winner on this great, easy ball. And those are always the shots that we blow. So I think it's always important to go, okay, I'm going to hit a really good shot that's going to set me up for another good shot. And if it happens to be a winner, it's a bonus. But if not, then you're actually ready for the next ball coming at you. And you go for a high percentage. You go for going to the weakness, especially if it's a ball in the middle of the court. And you're attacking, but you're attacking with margins. And that makes a huge difference.
I think something you said,
errors.
which is super important, is there. I don't know if you said it, but I took it as you said it. There's no such thing as an easy, or you said easy ball. There's no such thing as an easy ball. I think when we get into this mentality of like, ooh, this is the easy ball. Oh, let me just relax because I have all day and this is easy. You wind up missing it. It's like how many times have you played a match and you're like, the easy ball, and you flag it in the net, or you're like, oh, hit the tarp. And when you have that mentality, you hear that in your mind, it just completely just disengages you from doing everything you need to do. So I think that's really important. When you think easy ball, there's just no easy ball in tennis.
Like that.
Should be a t-shirt.
There is no easy ball.
That'll be our next t-shirt.
Yeah.
All right, last couple questions.
Okay. We have a couple from Scott Nishimura. So here's here's an
John Malanga. When approaching a Chick-fil-A, do you drive through or walk up?
Well, that's really a question for James behind the camera.
James, what's the correct approach?
James has camped out for 24 hours
Walk
for the
up.
opening of a Chick-fil-A.
James says walk up. You'll beat the people in the drive-thru.
Are you
Yeah, that's your
allowed to
answer.
walk up?
He's talking about go in.
Like go inside.
Yeah,
Oh, go
walk into the
inside.
restaurant, yeah.
I thought you meant drive, walk up to the.
I can see
Can we
Kirby like,
see Kirby
knock, knock, knock,
standing
knock,
in
knock.
line?
Hey,
I was gonna say,
order.
I don't think that's like legal. Okay.
So,
Scott Nishimura, as the guy on the baseline, I often have a harder time with a low skidding slice than a topspin approach. Also, I noticed drills the team receiving the feed often makes errors overhitting a topspin approach, but rarely makes errors with a slice approach because they aren't trying to end the point, but treat it as a setup shot. This works great up until 4-0, well at 4-5, and not much at 5-0. When do you approach the net, and where do you position yourself in anticipation of a possible passing shot or a lob? So we pretty much.
wait, so what's the question?
This is the question. When do you approach the net? We already answered this.
With the slice?
Yes. When do you approach the net? Slice versus topspin. So basically, we already answered it, but I just thought that was a really good observation.
Yeah.
As far as the levels go. Like it's a great breakdown if you're watching this at any point in time that Scott made, that it works great up until 4-0 to be hitting slice.
Just well placed and
Yeah.
without trying to be a hero.
over a big topspin ball trying to be a hero. And then it worked well at 4-5. And then at 5-0, as you
Better be a hell of
develop,
a slice.
yeah, that your best bet seems to be the topspin approach. So
I agree with that, yeah.
interesting.
And I think it depends upon singles or doubles.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm assuming he's talking about singles
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. That's a really good point too.
Yeah.
Let us know. We're wrapping up. So let us know if you have questions in the chat.
In the chat said drive or topspin approach. Drive or topspin approach or slice when you have the option. When is down the line more effective? We kind of talked about that. So let's just go down the line with the coaches. So if you have the option between drive, topspin, or slice, what do you use? So I guess assuming that
Is the ball above the net?
Yeah, it's so many situations.
If the ball's above the net, drive down the line or drive to the weakness.
Yeah,
every time.
Set up the specifics.
Arlington?
Yeah, it's just this. Because, you could are you talking my forehand or backhand? If you're talking my backhand, I actually don't mind slicing my backhand down the line and keeping it low because I know I'm going to put myself in position. Whereas if I hit topspin, sometimes I'm like, ooh, that ball might sit up a little bit to the person's forehand. I'd rather them hit up on a forehand and I might slice, or I might slice it short. So, all these things we're talking about, if it's my forehand, if it's my backhand, I don't mind slicing and come in. If it's my forehand, I know I can hit the forehand big enough and heavy enough to disrupt somebody to their backhand side.
Well, I'm going to add one more thing from the lefty side of the table. So for us having to approach means something a little different. So it depends on, if we're approaching down the line, we're approaching right into your forehand on from our forehand side. So on that perspective, it's going to depend, but I would most rather prefer hitting topspin on my forehand and slice on my backhand.
Same answer for me. Topspin or drive forehand and slice backhand.
Boom.
Boom.
Yeah, to the ad side, 97% of the time. And then shade hard to the right.
Run in.
Yeah.
Kiss the net strap, put my racket.
Oh man. All right. Wait. John Malinga, if you see a famous person in an airport or restaurant, do you approach or not? No. Never.
Yeah.
What about you guys?
Depends upon the person. How much do I really want to meet them? Do I want to meet them enough to disrupt them?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
I think it depends on who.
Who would it have to be? We're talking like Bruce Lee. Then you're like, yes.
Oh, Bruce Lee. Yeah, we're homies.
We're homies.
He just doesn't know it yet.
Yeah.
Gary Vaynerchuk or Casey
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. You run up and you're like, Mr. Vaynerchuk.
Tim Ferriss, I would too. Totally would.
Elon Musk.
Tim is.
Oh my God.
Elon Musk. Yeah.
I'd totally getting
if you see Rod Laver.
I don't know. It's touchy though, because both Ferris and Musk, it's going to be kind of awkward. So
you take the chance.
Yeah.
How many chances do you get to go like, hey, let's take? I really, admire your work and blah blah blah. Let's take a picture. If he shoots me out, it's like, well, you know what?
Yeah.
Too bad. But you much rather get shot down and say, oh, that guy, compared to like, oh my God, what if I would have just asked him if he took a picture? And you always see this little kid go up after you, and he gets the picture, and you're like. And you blew your shot.
What about Rod Laver?
Yeah, I think he's a cool guy.
I would say thank you, Mr. Laver.
Mr. Rocket.
Mr. Rocket.
What else? That's
what we got.
That's what we have for you. We will be coming to you next time in the next couple of weeks. So right after this, I'm actually going to put the date in. So as soon as you see it on the welcome page, put it on your calendar. All of the information is to come. And
which date?
I'm not sure.
Oh, for the next. Okay.
Yes.
I just didn't know I thought maybe you were talking about the clinic.
No, clinic is going to be on May 25th. Make sure that you get in touch with us, Academy members, and get signed up. You get your registration in because we are going to cap it. We just decided before this that we're going to cap this so that we can really deliver a great experience.
Registration's on the welcome page, the Academy welcome page.
So for now, unless you guys have something else that you want to leave them with.
No?
There's no easy shots in tennis.
No easy shots in tennis. That's good.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
See you, everybody.
Bye.
See ya. Just do our ET high five.
Yeah.